do anything right now. You don't need to be anywhere. Whatever the day brought you, whatever it asked of you, whatever it left unfinished at the edges, you can set it down now, the way you might set down something heavy you have been carrying for a long time without quite noticing the weight. Just let it go. Let it rest somewhere nearby where you can find it again if you need it. But you will not need it tonight. Find a comfortable position. Let your body settle into the surface beneath you. Feel how it supports you, how it receives your weight without asking anything in return. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw unclench just a little. Let the space behind your eyes soften. There's nothing here that requires your attention to be sharp. You are allowed to be soft now. Take a slow breath in, not a deep, effortful breath, just a natural one, easy and unhurried. And let it go even more slowly than it came. Again, breathing in and out, and the out breath is long and warm, and with it goes a little more of whatever the day was holding on to inside you. Good. In a moment, not yet, but soon, you're going to find yourself somewhere very quiet, somewhere warm and old and entirely unhurried, a place that has been here for a long time and will go on being here long after tonight, keeping its own time, indifferent to clocks and calendars and the particular anxieties of the world you are drifting away from. You don't need to imagine it too precisely just yet. Just let yourself become a little lighter. Let your breathing become a little slower. And when you are ready, and there's no rush at all, let your eyes close and come with me. There's stone beneath your feet. It is warm, not hot, but pleasantly, steadily warm, the way a stone holds warmth in the late afternoon and gives it back to you gently in the evening. It is pale stone, almost white, with a texture that is soft rather than rough, slightly porous, like dried sea foam pressed into solid ground. Pumice, ancient pumice, the color of old ivory, worn smooth by years of bare feet and rising moisture, and the slow, patient work of warm water finding its way through every tiny channel in the rock. You stand on it and feel it give back its warmth through the soles of your feet, and the warmth travels up gradually, unhurriedly, from your feet to your ankles to the backs of your legs, and you become, almost without noticing it, a little warmer, a little more still. The air around you is humid, not the humid of a summer afternoon that sits on the skin and presses. This is softer than that, a lighter humidity, the kind that opens the lungs rather than closing them. It smells of wet limestone, that clean, mineral, slightly chalky smell, like the inside of a cave that has never seen sunlight. Except here there's warmth instead of cold, and the smell is gentle rather than damp. Underneath it, very faint, almost at the edge of perception, there's a breath of dissolved sulfur, the deep mineral exhale of water that has traveled through layers of ancient rock before rising here to the surface. It is not an unpleasant smell. It is the smell of something very old and very patient, something that has been making its slow way upward through the earth for longer than anyone can measure, and has arrived here, finally, in a state of perfect stillness. You are inside, or almost inside. You are in a wide, circular gallery that runs along the outermost ring of the bathhouse, and the vaulted windows along one side are open to the night, fitted with no glass, no screen, only the smooth curve of the arch, and then open sky. The night air comes through those arches in slow, cool drifts, gentle, unhurried, carrying with it the faint smell of open water somewhere far below, and of cloud, and of the particular cool blankness of a sky that is entirely dark, without moon, without stars tonight, only depth and quiet. The contrast between that coolness and the warmth rising from the stone floor is one of the first things you feel here. That meeting of warm and cool, and how the warm stone wins, slowly and without effort. The light is amber, not bright, never bright, but warm and constant, cast by small oil lamps set into shallow niches in the stone walls at intervals, each flame burning steadily, barely flickering. The light it makes slightly golden, slightly orange, the color of last light on a warm evening, except here it does not fade. It simply continues, patient and soft, pooling in the curves of the arched ceiling and lying along the surface of the stone floor like something liquid. The ceiling is high, domed above each chamber, ribbed with pale stone vaulting that is darkened slightly with years of rising steam, the color of old ivory shading toward warm gray at the peaks. And from the highest point of each dome hangs a single lamp on a long chain, swaying so slightly, barely at all, the movement more of a long, slow tremor than a swing. Because the island drifts, you see. The island moves. It is drifting now. You can feel it if you stand very still. Not a lurch or a pitch. Nothing that upsets your balance, but a slow, long movement. Almost more like a breath than a motion. The way a large body of water shifts when something very far away disturbs it. The island is a vast disk of pale pumice, ancient and buoyant, resting somewhere between a warm inland sea and the open sky. And it moves according to no schedule that anyone has ever been able to determine. Gradually, imperceptibly, carrying the bathhouse and everything in it through regions of low cloud, through stretches of open air, through the warm thermals that rise from the sea below in long, slow columns. You feel the movement now as a very slight settling of the stone beneath your feet. Not an instability, but an adjustment, the way an old building settles on its foundations. And you can hear it too. A barely audible creak, low and resonant, like the sound a very large wooden beam makes when the temperature changes. Except here, it is stone, and the creak is softer, more like a murmur, the island talking to itself as it drifts. Along the inner wall of this gallery, the wall that curves away from the open arches and runs deeper into the bathhouse, there are archways of a different kind, these ones fitted with curtains. Not fabric curtains, vapor curtains. They hang between the stone pillars the way silk would hang, in long, slow folds, almost transparent, catching the amber lamplight and holding it for a moment before releasing it again. But they are made of nothing but condensed mineral steam, drawn up from the pools and woven into thin, gauzy sheets that separate one chamber from the next. Through them, you can see the suggestion of the rooms beyond. The curved walls, the dark mirror of still water in a deep stone basin, the slow rise of steam from the surface, all of it softened and made dreamlike by the vapor curtain between you and it, the way a watercolor is softened by too much water. The image there, but gentle, unfocused, more feeling than picture. The curtains sway in almost nothing, barely a breath of air, and they respond, shifting in long, slow waves from top to bottom, the light moving through them as they move, and the sound they make is not quite a sound, more of a presence. A soft hiss, very quiet, very constant. The low, continuous exhale of mineral steam finding its way through the weave, through the tiny gaps in the vapor gauze. The sound of water becoming air, and then becoming something in between. And then you see her. She is at the far end of the gallery, moving away from you with her back half turned, and she is carrying a loom. Not a large loom. It is long-handled, about the size of a window frame, its frame made of pale driftwood, smoothed to a high polish, strung across with the faintest threads you have ever seen. Threads of condensed vapor, drawn fine as spider silk, almost invisible until they catch the amber light and become briefly, softly, gold. This is the Veilwright. She moves without hurry. Each step is deliberate and unhurried on the warm pumice floor, bare feet on pale stone, and her clothing is simple. A long, undyed linen shift, the kind of garment that belongs to no particular era or country. And her hair is pinned up loosely, with a few strands loose at the temples, slightly curled by the humidity. She does not look up. She does not look around. She is entirely absorbed in her work, and her work is deeply, profoundly calm. She is the bathhouse's only caretaker. Her sole duty is to maintain the vapor curtains, to watch for the ones that grow too thin, that develop tears where the vapor has dispersed and left a gap in the gauze, and to repair them, or to weave new ones when the old ones have grown too far gone to mend. Tonight, she is working in the outermost ring, this ring, the one you have entered, where the pools are cooler than those at the center, and the walls have taken on the deep ivory color of old stone, and the curtains between the chambers are the oldest in the bathhouse, some of them woven years ago by Veilwrights who are no longer here, their work still hanging in patient folds between the archways. She moves from arch to arch, studying each curtain, holding her lamp close, running her eyes along the gauze, finding the thin places, the small tears, the places where the vapor has faded to near nothing. You follow her at a distance, not intruding, only watching, the way you might watch a craftsperson at work through a workshop window. Your bare feet are silent on the warm stone. The low hiss of steam is constant. The island drifts. The first curtain she stops at is the one hanging in the second archway along the gallery. Not the outermost arch, but the one that opens into the first of the pool chambers proper. And this curtain is one of the older ones. Its gauze thicker in some places, and almost absent in others, hanging in long, pale swags that have lost some of their regularity. The way old lace loses its evenness, but gains something else instead. A looseness, a texture, a sense of having been worn in. She holds her lamp close. She studies the lower left corner, where there is a long diagonal tear. Not a dramatic one, not a rent, but a gradual thinning that has opened into a soft gap. The stone floor of the chamber just barely visible through it. A dark mirror of still water beyond that. She sets the lamp down in the nearest niche. No, not sets it down, places it, with the kind of care that says she has done this 10,000 times and has never once been careless. And then she lifts the loom in both hands, holding it level before her at the height of the tier, and she begins. The work of the Veilwright is this. She draws a thread. She holds the loom close to the surface of the existing curtain, close enough that the warmth of the vapor still in the gauze meets the vapor rising from below and between them, that meeting, a new thread forms. A single strand of condensed mineral steam, fine as breath, almost nothing, and she draws it slowly from the mist with the edge of the loom frame, the way you might draw a line with the edge of a card, slow and steady, the thread coming with it in a long, trembling filament. Then she presses it to the tear, and it holds. It holds immediately. Vapor meeting vapor, knitting back into gauze, the repair almost invisible against the existing curtain, just a slightly brighter section where the new vapor has condensed more freshly, a little more luminous in the lamplight, which will fade as the curtain ages and they become indistinguishable. She draws another thread, presses it. It holds. Another and another. The tier closes slowly from the bottom up, each thread laid with patience and perfect evenness. The loom moving in long, slow passes, the way a hand moves when smoothing a crumpled page. And the page smooths, and the page smooths, and after a while, there's no tier, only curtain. She stands back, not far back, just enough to look, and tilts her head very slightly to one side, studying her work by lamplight. Then she nods once to no one in particular, and picks up her lamp and moves to the next arch. You walk with her, or behind her, at your own pace, following the slow progress of the amber lamp along the gallery. The warm stone is always beneath your feet. The hiss of steam is always in the air. Through the open arches on your left, the night passes outside, slowly, the way night does here. The sky dark and absolute, the cloud below the island visible as a pale smudge in the darkness when you look down through the arch, and the warm updraft from the sea far beneath, coming through the opening and meeting the cool night air and the warm interior air all at once, so that near each open arch there's a particular pocket of mixed temperature, cool and warm at once. The cool from outside and the warmth from the stone, and standing in that pocket is like standing at the exact boundary between seasons. You move through it, and the warm stone reasserts itself immediately, the temperature equalizing as you step back toward the inner wall, back toward the curtains and the lamplight, and the slow, constant hiss. The second chamber she enters is through the next curtain along, and here she does not repair, but replaces. The curtain in this arch is one of the oldest in the gallery. You can see it before she touches it, can see that it is barely there, more suggestion than substance. The gauze so thin in places that it is simply gone. Only the faintest shimmer of condensation on the stone pillar, where the curtain once attached, indicating where vapor has deposited itself over years of slow evaporation. She studies it for a long moment. She runs one finger along the stone pillar where the curtain's edge meets the arch, and the touch is so light that the gesture barely stirs the remnant gauze. And yet, the remnant stirs. A single long shiver running down from top to bottom before the last of it dissipates entirely into the warm air, dissolving back into the general humidity, becoming part of the bathhouse again, rather than part of the curtain. She watches it go without any sign of loss. It is simply time for a new one. The weaving of a new curtain takes longer than a repair. She positions herself in the center of the arch, standing in the archway itself, so that the pool chamber is behind her and the gallery is before her, and she holds the loom perpendicular to herself, frame out, like a door she is holding open. And then, slowly, she begins drawing. Not single threads now, She draws from the warm air itself, from the column of steam rising from the pool in the chamber behind her, which has been rising all night undisturbed and has accumulated in the dome above, thickened, grown dense and heavy with mineral content. And that density is what she is after. She holds the loom just inside the rising column of vapor, and the vapor enters the frame, and she moves the loom slowly, very slowly, in long horizontal passes, and behind each pass, a thread is laid across the previous one, the vapor compressing slightly in the frame, each thread adding to the one before, the gauze building gradually the way frost builds on glass, not all at once, but crystal by crystal, pass by pass, barely visible at first, and then, after a while, after many passes, beginning to show. The new curtain takes shape, the way fog takes shape in a valley, gradually, as if it was always there, and you simply could not see it until conditions were right. A shimmer first, then a faint translucency, then something with weight and body, a gauze that swings very slightly when she moves the loom, that catches the lamplight and holds it for a moment, amber on white, on warm gray, before releasing it again into the room. The smell during this process is richer. The mineral exhale of the pool intensifies as she draws from it, the sulfur note deeper and more present, the limestone smell thicker, the whole air of the chamber becoming for a few minutes more steam than air before settling back to its usual gentle balance. She works. You watch. The island drifts. Outside, the first of the low clouds reaches the island. You notice it before she does. Or perhaps she notices it at the same moment, but simply continues working, because there is nothing to do about it, and nothing to be concerned about. The cloud is simply weather. The bathhouse passes through it and out the other side. This has happened many times. The darkness through the open arches changes character. It becomes slightly paler, slightly more present, the way thick mist is more present than open air. And then, gradually, the smell changes. Wet chalk. That is the smell of the cloud, distinct from the mineral smell of the bathhouse. This is something cooler, something exterior, a clean, damp smell, like a room that has had its windows open during rain, and it comes in through the open arches in slow drifts, mixing with the warm interior air, and then softening and warming as it spreads through the gallery. The lamps barely stir. The muffled silence of the cloud is different from the silence of open air, thicker, more padded, the way snow silences a landscape by absorbing rather than blocking sound. The distant hiss and sigh of the sea far below disappears completely, absorbed by the cloud, and for a few minutes, the only sounds are interior sounds. The low mineral hiss of the rising steam, the faint creak of the settling stone, the barely audible passage of vapor thread through the loom frame, the sound of water finding its level in the pool chamber behind the Veilwright. A gentle adjustment as the island's slow drift shifts the basin's contents by the smallest fraction of an angle, and the water moves just a little to rebalance itself, and then is still. The Veilwright continues, pass by pass, thread by thread. The new curtain grows. By the time the cloud begins to thin outside, you can tell by the quality of the darkness through the arches, which shifts back from pale and present to deep and open, and by the return of the faint sea smell from below, cool and clean. She has finished the new curtain and stepped back from the arch. It hangs perfectly, not perfectly in the sense of being uniform or precise. It is slightly uneven at the bottom hem, where the vapor threads were finer and the weave is a little looser. And there is a faint texture to it, a slight variation in translucency from left to right, where she drew from different densities of steam, but perfectly in the sense that it belongs here exactly, that it is exactly what this arch needs, that it fits the stone the way a well-made garment fits a shoulder. The amber lamplight comes through it and is transformed, softened, diffused, the sharp little flame of the lamp in the chamber beyond becoming a warm glow behind the gauze, as if the lamp has been wrapped in something gentle. She places her hand flat against it, lightly, barely touching, and the curtain presses back with the faintest resistance, the resistance of something new and whole and well-made, the resistance of vapor that has been coaxed from mist into gauze and intends to hold. She nods again, the same single nod, and picks up her loom and her lamp and moves along. The next few chambers come one after another in slow succession, each one its own particular quiet, each one carrying its own version of the same warmth and mineral smell and amber light, the variations subtle but present. In one chamber, the pool is slightly larger, and the steam rises in a broader column, so the smell is fuller and the air thicker. In another, the dome is lower, and the steam collects more densely against the ceiling, and the lamplight at the top of the room is hazier, more diffuse, as if the room is wearing a soft crown of cloud. In one chamber, the stone walls have been worn to a particular smoothness by what must have been centuries of brushing contact. The stone here is almost glassy in places, and the amber light slides across it in long reflections that shift when you move, your movement changing the angle of reflection so that the walls seem momentarily alive, as if something underneath the stone is warming and cooling, breathing. In this chamber, the Veilwright works slowly, very slowly, not because the curtain is difficult, but because it is delicate. The gauze here is old but intact, one of the ones that has survived without major damage, only a scattering of small, thin places. No tears, just a general slight translucency that indicates the vapor has been slowly dispersing, as vapor does, and the curtain needs not replacing, but refreshing. A slow, general application of new vapor pressed into the existing gauze to restore its density. The way you might press a dry sponge into water and watch it absorb, rather than replace what it is made of. She does this with the flat of the loom, not drawing threads, but holding the woven vapor in the frame close to the existing curtain and allowing the heat and density of the new vapor to diffuse slowly into the old, the gauze accepting it with a gradual deepening of translucency, becoming slightly less transparent, slightly more present, like a voice becoming slightly louder without quite changing its tone. She holds the loom against each section in turn, upper left, upper right, the long middle sweep, the lower sections where the curtain has been thinnest, and with each section, she is still for a long moment while the diffusion happens, standing perfectly still with her hands level and her breathing slow. And the only movement in the room is the very slight tremor of the curtain where the new vapor presses against it, and the slow rise of steam from the pool, and the almost imperceptible sway of the hanging lamp above. You find yourself breathing more slowly. You hadn't noticed it until now, but your breath has been following the rhythm of her work. Long in, long out, the same pace as her passes with the loom, the same pace as the steam rising from the dark water in the basin. This is not something you chose. It simply happened. The the way breathing always finds its rhythm when the world around it is very still. After the refreshing is done, she moves to the archway between this chamber and the next and pauses, not to work, simply to pause. She sets the loom against the wall, leaning it there with a care that says it is a tool she is accustomed to resting as gently as she uses it, and she kneels at the edge of the pool. The pool in this chamber is still, has been still all night, undisturbed by anything, and its surface is perfect, a dark mirror held in the oval of the stone basin, so precise in its reflection that the hanging lamp above is reproduced in the water below with absolute fidelity, a second amber glow in the depths, so that it appears that there is another room beneath the first, identical and inverted, the domed ceiling hanging below the floor, the lamp burning upward from the bottom of the basin. She looks into it for a moment. Then she reaches out with one finger, very slowly, as if conscious of disturbing something that deserves its stillness, and touches the surface. The reflection fractures, not violently. It becomes a network of slow, concentric rings, expanding outward from her fingertip, the lamp above breaking into many softened copies of itself, each ring carrying a smaller, more diffuse version of the light, and the rings spread to the edges of the basin and are absorbed by the stone, and then the water is still again. The reflection reforms, perfect again, the lamp burning upward from below. She sits back on her heels and watches the rings settle. She watches the surface return to stillness, the way you might watch a sentence complete itself, knowing the end is coming, not in any hurry for it, simply present for the whole of it. And when the water is still again, and the reflection is perfect again, she stands unhurriedly and picks up the loom and moves on. The island has cleared the cloud bank now. You feel it as a single degree of temperature change. Subtle. The difference between a room with a window slightly open and a room with the window closed. Just enough to perceive. Just enough to remind you that the air outside is cooler than the air inside, and that the boundary between them passes through the open arches along the gallery. The pumice stone on the outer wall, the wall that faces open sky, cools slightly, and as it does, it releases the particular dry stone smell that warm pumice has, a smell that is almost neutral, almost nothing, like the smell of freshly dried laundry, except drier, calmer, without any trace of the floral or the warm, just the smell of mineral and time. And as the island clears the cloud and the stone cools that single degree, the pools respond. You don't see it happen. The water is still, the surface undisturbed, but you hear it and you smell it. A deeper plume of steam rises from the nearest pool, and then from the next, and the one after that, the pools responding to the slight ambient temperature drop by exhaling more generously. The differential between water temperature and air temperature widening by the smallest fraction and being answered by this quiet intensification of rise. The hiss, already constant, already low and familiar, deepens by a tone, becomes, for a few minutes, very slightly richer, slightly fuller, the way a piece of music becomes fuller when a new instrument enters. Except this is not music. It is something older and simpler than music. It is just warm water breathing in cool air. The Veilwright pauses in her passage along the gallery and tilts her head, listening, you think, or simply noticing. She looks at the nearest curtain and sees it moving slightly more than before, the deeper steam exhale is creating a gentle updraft, very faint, but enough to animate the gauze, and the curtain sways in slow, full waves from top to bottom, the amber light moving through it in long, lazy rhythms. She watches it for a moment, the expression on her face not concern, not satisfaction, just a kind of quiet attention, the attention of someone who knows their work well enough to recognize normal variation and is comfortable with it. Then she nods, that same single nod, and continues. The third chamber she enters through is the one she will spend the most time in tonight, though she doesn't know that yet. Or perhaps she does, in the way that someone who knows a place well anticipates what it will need without having to think about it. This chamber is at the corner of the outermost ring, where the gallery curves around and the two walls that face open sky are at right angles to each other, and the drafts from outside meet here and create a slightly more complex air, cooler than the rest of the ring. The two open arches allowing more of the night in, the pumice stone on both outer walls noticeably cooler to the touch. The pool here steams more than the others as a consequence, and the dome above it is fogged with condensation. The stone of the ceiling dark with moisture, and the water in the basin is slightly opaque. Not murky, just mineral dense. A faint gray-green color where the lamp catches it at certain angles, like the color of very old sea glass. The curtain at the inner arch is, as she anticipated, in need of significant repair, not replacement. The body of it is still sound, the main weave intact, but there are tears, multiple small ones, scattered across the gauze in a pattern that suggests the double drafts from the corner arches have been pressing against it from both sides, wearing it thin along certain stress lines. The largest tear is near the top, a long horizontal one, spanning most of the width of the curtain, and through it, the gallery beyond is clearly visible rather than softly suggested. Too clear, too sharp, the gauze losing here the quality that makes it a curtain rather than simply an absence. She begins at the top, the long tier first, then work downward. This is her instinct and her practice. Begin with the most significant. Work toward the smaller. Let the smaller ones wait their turn, without worrying about them, while the large one is addressed. The loom rises in her hands to the height of the tear, and she draws. The thread comes, fine and trembling, the smooth resistance of the vapor drawing taut against the frame. A sound so quiet, it is almost inside you rather than outside, and she presses, and it holds. Another. The thread comes and holds, and another, and another. The loom moving in those long, steady passes, the tear closing slowly from one end toward the other, the gauze reforming with that slightly brighter luminosity where the new vapor is freshest. She works, and you watch, and the island drifts, and the steam rises, and the lamps burn with perfect steadiness in their stone niches, and the night outside is very dark, and very quiet, and very far away. Halfway through the repair, she pauses, not to rest exactly, but to assess. She steps back from the curtain and holds her lamp close, moving it slowly across the repaired section, the light picking out the fresh threads against the older gauze, showing her the evenness of the work, whether the new threads match the tension of the old ones, whether the color of the fresh vapor will fade at the same rate as the surrounding curtain, or whether it will stand out for too long like a visible patch, which would not damage the function, but would offend the Veilwright's sense of how the work should look. She is satisfied with the tension. The color will fade in its own time. She continues. The smaller tiers below the large one take less time each, but require more care. Being small, the threads she draws for them must be finer. The pressure she applies more precise. And there is a kind of focused attention needed for small, precise work that is different from the focused attention needed for long, sweeping work. The former, more concentrated, more still. The whole of it happening in the small movements of fingers and wrists, rather than the broader movements of arms and shoulders. She bends slightly closer for each small tier. Her hands are very steady. The threads she draws are fine as nothing. Vapor at the very limit of its own coherence, the thinnest possible wire of condensed mineral steam, the kind that would disperse again in an instant if she moved too quickly. But she does not move too quickly. She moves exactly as slowly as the thread requires, and the thread holds, and the repair holds, and one by one the small tiers close, running her fingers along the last few tiers. This is what she does for the very smallest ones, the ones that are more thin places than actual openings. She simply smooths them, the same gesture as smoothing a page, the same patient repetition, back and forth along the thin place, until the vapor in it has been encouraged to redistribute, to fill in the warmth of her fingertips, perhaps helping, the slight pressure of her touch coaxing the gauze back toward wholeness. These repairs hold immediately too, just as the ones she made earlier in the night held immediately, the vapor accepting her touch and responding to it with the quiet cooperation of a material that is well suited to its work. When she is finished with the corner chamber, she stands in the center of it for a moment, the pool breathing steam around her, the double drafts from the corner arches touching her face with their cool, and the lamplight amber above the dark water, and the curtain behind her now whole, hanging in slow folds between the pillars, as if it had never been otherwise. And she is simply still, not meditating, not resting, simply present in the room she has just finished tending, the way a craftsperson is present for a moment at the end of work, before moving on, standing inside the thing they have made or repaired and feeling whether it is right. It is right. She picks up the loom. She picks up the lamp. She moves on. The gallery curves, and you follow it. The Veilwright a little ahead of you with her amber lamp, the curtains on the inner wall slowly passing. Each one you have watched her work on hanging whole and luminous in its arch. And beyond each curtain, the pool in its chamber, the still dark water, and the rising steam, and the hanging lamp above, all of it duplicated in the water below. Those inverted rooms with their upward burning lamps, the sound of water finding its own level in each basin, adjusting, always adjusting, to the slow drift of the island, is a sound you notice more and more the longer you have been here. A small, deep, liquid note, very low, almost below hearing, the sound of mass and gravity in quiet conversation. And behind all of it, always and constantly, the low hiss, that steady, patient mineral exhale, the steam rising from the pools and from the stone itself where it is warmest, a sound that has become, by now, as unremarkable as your own breath, as present and as easy. You pass through several more chambers. Not all of them need work tonight, and the Veilwright's lamp moves through some of them without pausing. The curtains hanging sound and whole in their arches. And these rooms she simply walks through, her lamp held slightly higher, so the light sweeps the gauze as she passes, checking, confirming, moving on. In these rooms, you have the time to notice the small details that the workrooms didn't permit. The particular way the warm fog sits near the ceiling of each dome, not moving, simply being there. The stone above it darkened with years of moisture. The surface of the pumice walls, where generations of small mineral deposits have built up in the pores. Tiny crystals of salt and sulfate that catch the lamplight and scatter it, so that the walls sparkle very faintly in certain angles, as if the stone is generating its own slow, cold light. The texture of the stone beneath your feet changes subtly as you move through the gallery. Some sections worn to a near glass smoothness, where the paths converge at doorways. Other sections further from traffic that retain a slight porosity, a slight give. And when you press your foot down gently on these sections, you feel the stone yield a fraction, not structurally, just texturally, the way pumice does, the tiny cavities in it compressing the thinnest layer of air. After some time, it is impossible to say how much time, the bathhouse keeps its own clock, and the clock is the temperature of the water, and the water has been warm all night and will be warm when morning comes. If morning comes here the same way it comes elsewhere, which is not entirely certain. After some time, the Veilwright sets her loom against the wall of the gallery and does not pick it up again immediately. She moves instead to one of the pool chambers she has already tended, the one with the perfectly still water, the one whose surface she touched with a single finger and watched reform. And she sits. There is a long, low bench of pale pumice stone against the interior wall, smoothed by years of use, and she sits on this bench with her feet flat on the warm floor and her hands resting open in her lap. And she is simply here, in this room, in this warmth, in this smell of mineral and steam and warm stone, with the amber light above her and the curtain hole in its arch and the island drifting slowly, somewhere in the long, dark night. You sit as well. There is room on the bench. The stone is warm beneath you. That same warm, that same soft insistence of pumice, holding the heat of the pools and giving it back. And the warmth comes up through the backs of your legs and spreads, gradually, into your lower back. And you let yourself lean against the wall behind you. And the wall is warm too, and the warmth accepts you, receives you, asks nothing. The steam from the pool is close here. You can feel it on your face, very light, a warmth that sits on the skin rather than pressing it. And the mineral smell is stronger at this proximity, the sulfur note more definite, not unpleasant, clean and ancient, the smell of water from very deep in the earth making its patient way to the surface, the limestone note underneath it, the faint chalk smell from the cloud you passed through, still lingering at the edges of the room, softer now, blending. After a while, after a long while, the Veilwright shifts on the bench and rests her hands flat on the warm stone on either side of her, palms down, and closes her eyes. Not sleeping. You can tell she is not sleeping. Her breathing hasn't changed. She is simply with the room, with the warmth and the smell and the low, continuous sound, being here the way the stone is here, without effort or intention, simply present. You let your own shoulders drop a little more. You let your hands rest open in your lap, or at your sides, wherever they have settled. The warm stone is under your palms, or under your thighs, or simply beneath your feet. It is warm. It is warm. The island drifts. A long time passes, or a short time. It is the same here. And you simply rest in the warmth and the mineral smell and the amber light and the constant, patient hiss of the steam. And your breathing is slow, and your body is heavy with warmth, and there's nothing you need to do, nowhere you need to go, no particular thought you need to follow. And the thoughts that do come, because thoughts always come, you cannot stop them, only let them pass. Those thoughts arrive and drift through, gentle and unhurried as the island itself, and they leave the same way they arrived, dissolving back into the general warmth without leaving much trace. The curtains and the arches sway very slightly. The lamps are steady. The water in the basin is perfectly still. After her rest, and it is not long, it is the rest of someone who has 1 or 2 more tasks before the night is over. The Veilwright opens her eyes and rises from the bench. With the same unhurried quality of motion she brings to everything, she takes her lamp from its niche and moves not to the loom, but to the far end of the chamber, where there is a small, low table set into an alcove in the wall. Not a furnishing you had noticed before, recessed into the stone as it is, shadowed. And on the table, a ceramic bowl, a small clay pot, a cloth folded neatly beside them. She fills the bowl from the clay pot. Hot water, you see, steaming slightly in the cooler air of the alcove. Water that has been sitting there in the covered pot, staying warm, the way water in a closed vessel stays warm for hours in a heated room. And she sets the pot down and wraps both hands around the bowl and holds it. That is all. Just the warmth of the bowl in the hands. She stands there with the bowl between her palms and the steam rising from the surface, and her eyes looking at nothing in particular. Not at the bowl, not at the room, simply resting on the middle distance, the way eyes rest on nothing when the mind is elsewhere, and elsewhere is somewhere warm and easy. You imagine the warmth in her hands, the smooth curve of the ceramic against the palms, the heat distributed evenly, the weight of the water in the bowl, a small, grounding weight. You imagine, or perhaps you feel, the same thing in your own hands. Whatever warmth is close to you now, wherever you are lying or resting, the warmth of the surface under you, the warmth of any covering over you, the warmth your own body makes and keeps. It is there. You can feel it if you let yourself. That warmth is here with you. She drinks from the bowl slowly, not a drink of thirst, just a slow sipping. The water warm enough to feel all the way down, and you can see in the way her face changes, the very slight relaxation around the eyes, the jaw dropping a fraction, the shoulders dropping that fraction further, how the warmth spreads from the hands and from the throat inward, the way warmth always spreads, outward from its source in all directions, until the whole body has received it. She drinks until the bowl is empty. She sets it down on the table. She folds the cloth over it, a gesture of completion, of tidiness, of saying, "This is done and properly put away." Then she rinses her hands in the pool, the mineral water warm against the palms, that chalky warmth, that ancient warmth, and dries them on the hem of her shift. A small domestic gesture, entirely out of keeping with the ancient grandeur of the bathhouse, and entirely in harmony with it. Someone has always lived here. Someone has always dried their hands on the hem of their shift and set a bowl down on a low table and moved on to the next task. This is what it looks like to belong somewhere completely. She takes her loom again and moves back along the gallery, not forward into new chambers now, but back the way she came, retracing the night's work with her lamp held close to each curtain in turn, checking the repairs she made earlier. This is the last pass of the night, the final quality of the Veilwright's evening work, going back over what was done to confirm that the vapor has set properly, that the new threads have integrated with the old ones, that what was repaired will remain repaired. At each curtain, she pauses and holds her lamp close and looks. At each one, she finds the same thing. The repairs holding, the new vapor indistinguishable now from the old in places where enough time has passed, the gauze whole and translucent and amber in the lamplight, the steam from the pool moving through it in its slow, continuous exhale. She nods at each one, that single, quiet nod, and moves to the next. The new curtain she wove from nothing is the most beautiful of all to see on this last pass, because now it is fully settled, fully dry, the vapor compressed to its final density, and it hangs in the arch with a quality of presence that is perfectly suited to the room, catching the light of the lamp behind it and turning it into something dispersed and golden, so that the room beyond it glows rather than shines, illuminated from behind the gauze in the soft, even way that the interior of a lantern is illuminated. She pauses at this one a little longer than the others, not with pride, or if there is pride, it is the very quiet kind, the kind that you feel at having done something correctly and completely, and without unnecessary waste, the satisfaction of fit and function, of a thing made to serve its purpose, and doing exactly that. She lowers her lamp. She looks at the curtain for a long moment. Then she moves on. The last chamber she visits tonight is not a working visit. It is the chamber at the other corner of the outermost ring, the one opposite the cool corner she spent the most time in. And this one is different from that corner. Here, the two outer walls are angled slightly differently to the prevailing drift, and the night air comes through the arches, not as a double draft, but as a single slow current, moving in from one arch and out through the other, in a long, gentle circuit that keeps the air moving rather than pooling. The pool here steams more gently than the others as a result, the moving air carrying the steam away rather than letting it collect. And the room has a slightly different quality, slightly less humid than the rest of the ring. The air just a little cleaner, a little less thick. And the curtain in the inner arch here is one of the oldest in the bathhouse, somehow perfectly preserved, hanging in full, deep folds of gauze so dense it is nearly opaque, and the light behind it is barely visible, just the warmth of it pressing through the thick vapor gauze, amber and soft, the way light presses through heavy fog. The Veilwright does not touch this curtain. She simply holds her lamp close and looks at it, the thickness of it, the depth of it, the age of it, and whatever she feels, looking at a curtain that has been hanging for longer than she has been the Veilwright, that may have been hanging since before the Veilwright before her. Whatever she feels, it reads on her face as something close to reverence. Not awe, reverence. The quieter, more intimate version. The feeling of standing near something old that is still doing its work. She turns from it and walks to the pool in this chamber and sits on the edge of the basin. Not on the bench this time, but directly on the lip of the stone basin, her feet hanging over the water, not quite touching. The stone of the basin's edge is warm, warmer than the floor, being right above the water, and she sits there with her hands on her knees and her face turned toward the open arches. And through the arches, the night is very deep and very quiet, and the air coming through is cool and clean and carries the smell of open water far below. She breathes it in, slowly, out again. You breathe with her, in and out. The island drifts. The steam from the pool below her feet rises around her in slow columns, warming the air near the basin. And the night air from the arches meets it, and they blend. And the blend is exactly right. Not too warm, not too cool. The particular temperature of a room that has been maintained with care for a very long time by someone who knows what it needs. The amber lamp in the niche beside the arch is the only light, and it casts her shadow long across the pale floor, and the shadow moves very slightly as the lamp's flame trembles, not with any draft, but with its own internal movement, the small oscillations of a flame that has been burning for a long time and has settled into its own rhythm. The night is at its deepest now, not its latest, deepest. The quality of the darkness outside the arches has changed from the darkness of early night, which has the residual energy of the day in it, to this, the darkness of deep night, which is different in the way that deep water is different from shallow water, heavier, more absolute, more completely itself. The sky through the arches is not just dark, but fully dark. The darkness of a sky that has committed entirely to being night and will remain night for some time yet. The island floats in it, warm and lit, carrying its amber glow upward into the dark, the way a lantern carries its glow in a dark room. And somewhere below, the sea, warm and very far down, carrying the island on its surface with no effort at all. The island too light to disturb it, and the sea spreading away in every direction, and the night covering all of it. The Veilwright rises from the edge of the basin, slowly, with the easy slowness of someone whose body has arrived at the end of its work for the night and knows it. She stretches, not dramatically, just a small extension of the back and the shoulders, a releasing of the hours of careful, concentrated motion, the muscles unknitting themselves from precision. She takes her lamp from the niche and her loom from where it leans against the wall, and she walks the length of the gallery, the whole ring, the full arc of the outermost chambers, one final time, moving easily now, the lamp swinging slightly in her hand, the curtains passing on her left, all of them whole, all of them hanging well, the warm stone flowing under her bare feet, and the hiss of the steam constant and low, and the creak of the drifting island, its faint, familiar murmur. She pauses at the arch of the first chamber she tended tonight, the one with the long diagonal repair, and holds her lamp up. The repair is invisible now. The vapor has fully set, and the new threads are the same luminosity as the old ones, and the curtain is simply a curtain, whole and hanging, doing what it has always done. She can see through it to the pool beyond, that dark, still mirror, the lamp in it burning upward, and everything beyond the curtain is soft and warm and deeply quiet. She lowers the lamp. She leans the loom against the wall of the gallery, in the corner between two arches, where it has a place. You can see the slight wear on the stone there, the mark the loom's handle has made over time against the wall. Proof of habit, proof of repetition, proof of many nights exactly like this one. She sets it down. She walks toward the deeper interior of the bathhouse, toward the warmer central chambers, where the oldest and hottest pools are, where the stone is darkest with mineral stain, where the Veilwright's small living space is, tucked into the heart of the bathhouse, surrounded by the warmest rooms, where no cold ever reaches. Her lamp recedes down the inner corridor, amber and steady, growing smaller with distance, and the last thing you see is the light of it catching the curtain of the next inner ring as she passes. Just a flash of warm light on vapor gauze, translucent and gold for a moment, and then she is around the curve, and the light is gone, and the gallery is as it was before she came tonight, warm and still and amber and hissing, the pools breathing, the island drifting, the curtains hanging in their arches, whole. You are still on the bench, or you are still at the edge of the pool, or you are simply still exactly where you are, the warm stone under you, the warmth of it in your feet and your legs and the backs of your hands, spreading up through you slowly and evenly, and the mineral smell in the air, and the constant low hiss of the steam, and the amber light from the lamp in its niche, steady and patient. There's nothing left to do tonight. Everything has been tended. The curtains hang whole in their arches. The pools are warm and still. The island drifts on through the deep night, carrying all of this with it. The warmth and the light and the water and the gauze, drifting through open air, through cloud if there is cloud, through whatever the night holds, with no urgency and no particular destination, simply drifting. Let your body be heavy now. Let the warm stone receive you. The hiss of the steam is all around you, low and constant, below thought, below attention, simply there. The chalk smell of the cloud is at the edges of the air. The sulfur smell of ancient water, clean and mineral and very old. The amber light, the warmth. Let your breathing follow the steam, long and slow and warm, in and out. And out is longer than in, and the out breath takes something with it each time, some small weight, some small tightness, dissolving into the warm air the way vapor dissolves, simply becoming part of the warmth that is already here. The island drifts. The curtains sway in nothing. The lamps burn very steadily. The water in the basin is still. You can feel the warmth of the stone under your palms, the warmth rising from below, the warmth of the air on your face, just gently. There's a barely audible creak. The island settling, moving through the deep night. Your breathing is very slow now. In and out. The amber light is very soft. The steam rises, very slowly. The smell of old limestone, chalk and mineral and warmth. The curtains hang still. The island drifts. The water is still. The lamp is steady. The stone is warm beneath you. You are very heavy now, very warm. There is nothing to tend tonight. Everything is whole. The hiss of the steam, the warmth of the stone, the amber light, very soft. The island drifting. The curtains, still. The water, below the lamp, dark and still, and warm, drifting, still, warm.